Hello, my name's Ian Seeger from Pilot Career News. On the 6th and 7th of November, we held our very first virtual edition of Pilot Careers Live. We streamed over 30 different seminars with 60 speakers. There were 2 days packed full of great information. Of course, we recorded everything, and you're about to watch one of the videos from the event. Before you do, I just want to thank our sponsors, Bose, Alsim, Entro, and of course Poolies. Without them and without the exhibitors, it wouldn't be possible. The exhibitor pages are still live, so feel free to head on over there. Go to www.pilotcareerslive.com and click through to the exhibitors. There's loads of information, loads of downloads, all sorts of great stuff there for you. Anyway, enjoy the video, and if you find it useful, really appreciate it if you click subscribe on our YouTube channel. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hello everybody, welcome to our next panel session. The focus on this one is selection, and we've got a panel of absolute experts to share their insights for you on this. I feel it's always better to probably ask them to introduce themselves rather than for me to introduce them. They know themselves far better than I do. So whilst they prepare for having to do that, having had that just dumped on them, let me just mention our sponsors again, if I may. We've got some fantastic sponsors, Bose, Alsim, Poolies and Entrol. And you can shop at Poolies using the code PCL, and you will get a 5% discount on anything you buy through Poolies at the moment. So guys, I hope you've worked out who you are so that you can do your introductions. I'm going to go to ladies first. So Tiina, welcome. Please tell us who you are and where you come from.
My name's Tiina Conacher. I'm a chartered work psychologist. I've been working in the pilot selection space for far too many years now, both working in the civilian context for airlines, both recruiting direct entry pilots and ab initio, so cadet pilots into airlines. And I've also worked in the military previously, selecting officers and aircrew.
Brilliant. Thank you. Welcome, Tiina. Andy.
Karen, so Andy O'Shea, currently I'm chairman of the Aircrew Training Policy Group, which is an EASA advisory group. I'm also CEO of a company called the Airline Pilot Club and Aviation Partners and Specialists. And prior to that, I spent a long time in Ryanair, and I spent 18 years as head of training in Ryanair. So a fair bit of exposure to pilot training and selection.
And Jan, welcome.
Thank you. So first of all, thank you for inviting me to this panel. It's for me a great honor to be the same panel as Tiina and Andy. My name is Nubiola. I'm from Barcelona. I come from another industry. I'm a pharmacist, so I was in the pharmaceutical industry for 7 years, and in the meantime, I did the modular ATPL, and since 4 years ago, I'm a first officer in a major international airline based in Barcelona. And apart from that, I'm in the Barcelona Flight School. I'm a theoretical knowledge instructor, MCC instructor, and a member of the board of directors of this school.
Brilliant, thank you. One of the themes that's been coming throughout today is how important research is for people to actually be able to make an informed decision about going into this career in the current climate. And what you have here, everybody listening, are 3 people who can really share some insights to you about selection and how you prepare for it and the differences from ATO to airline selection, etc. So a really good session to be part of and pick their brains. We'll have a Q&A panel at the end of this group of discussions. So we'll save your questions for that Q&A and ask these speakers to come back for that panel. But in the meantime, I'm going to kick off discussion with a fairly open question. And that is, what should I expect if I'm going along to a selection day with an airline training provider for the moment? What should I expect to face? And I'm going to go, please, if I may, to Andy first off for that one.
Yeah, well, so you're going to have a combination of an assessment process and a selection process. So the processes that I was familiar with and am familiar with would have set you up prior to visiting the site of the ATO, and would have put you through a series of online assessments, and they would have been viewed jointly by the ATO and the airline, and they would both make a decision about your suitability to be brought in to do the interview. Now, typically there are many service providers for these assessment processes, and you can do them in your own home. They test everything from your English language, personality traits, multitasking, numeracy, and they try to, as they should, try to create a situation where they can understand your likelihood to develop the competencies, the pilot competencies that Carl was talking about in the previous session. So the online assessment will have been done, and then you arrive in the center and you will be confronted with an interview and a run around the simulator to see how your dexterity is and what your learning curve is. So this is at the ATO before a student would actually embark on an integrated training program.
Okay, great, thanks. So I'm aware myself some ATOs do take people into the sims and some ATOs don't do the sim tests at this stage. Tiina, what's the reason why one ATO might do that and another might not?
I think it all depends on the makeup of the whole assessment process and what they're looking for. So if they've covered a lot of the competencies that we've already keep mentioning here and the kind of aptitude and ability elsewhere, perhaps through a really significant testing regime, they might take the view that actually the simulator assessment isn't going to provide them with any more useful evidence about that student's suitability for their course. Others might take the view that it's a good way to introduce the student to the role of a pilot. Some people have never sat on flight deck when they arrive at an ATO. So it's a really good demonstration of what their future roles could be like. So they're obviously not looking for you to be a perfect specimen from day one. It's much more about your rate of learning, perhaps how you adjust to the instructions that are being given to you. And then also, it gives you an opportunity to see what it's really like and could be like when you go through your training and then beyond onto your role as a pilot.
Yeah, good, thanks. Okay, Jan, from your perspective, any differences?
No, exactly. I agree with them, with both. What we are looking for when we're looking for a student is that this student, apart from having basic knowledge to be sure that he will pass the training, he will be a suitable student. As well, we check for the motivation as well. We have to see if there is motivation enough to finish the training and then to find a job, because it looks easy maybe to pass the course initially, but then after you finish your basic training, in order to train you to be able to work for a major airline or for any kind of airline, and then first find a job, then be able to cope with all the training, you need a positive attitude. No, so this is this all makes our profile that we are looking for is a motivated student with the skills, of course, to be able to cope with all the training.
And Karen, if I could just add,
yes, Andy, sure.
In my experience, the ATOs and the selection process that do put a young person, even at that early stage, into a simulator, they end up with the highest conversion rate of those applicants entering a course, but also, and crucially, transferring and successfully converting into an airline job. So the selection process is very much the assessments, the interview, and that extra piece of being put in the simulator. Strange and all as it might seem to those applicants at that time, it is very interesting to the ATOs, and they're able to learn a lot from how people behave and perform in the simulator, even in a very kind of limited way. It's very revealing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think we keep losing the end of your feed a little bit, Andy, but I do anyway, so I'm not sure whether everybody is. But yeah, you're saying that the airlines, the training providers that use a sim assessment are getting a better result from the point of view of actually transitioning through into the airlines ultimately at the end of the day. But don't the aptitude tests replace that in some cases, Tiina?
Again, it depends on the aptitude tests that are being used and whether they've been statistically validated to actually predict training performance later on. So I think, you know, when used correctly, assessment methods are a powerful tool in terms of, you know, predicting future performance, but they need to be properly validated in order for you to draw those inferences out of them. Most ATOs are really good at that. So they actually do look at how their aptitude testing, even their interview, is performing at, you know, predicting future success. And that's something that's really important from an internal perspective when it comes to assessment processes.
Great, thanks. So what tests would an applicant expect to face going along to a selection day? You mentioned verbal reasoning, I think, earlier, Tiina. Can you describe what verbal reasoning is?
Processes have it. I would say that in general, what all ability tests and aptitude tests are looking to measure. Well, ability first of all is it's all about kind of understanding your intellectual horsepower, so to say. And by using things like verbal reasoning or numerical reasoning tests, it gives you an idea about your specific performance in those facets. So a verbal reasoning test, to answer your question, Karen, you know, it says exactly what it says on the tin. So it's looking at your ability to understand and comprehend verbal information and draw inferences out of that information that is presented to you. So often with that, what you see is a statement, a paragraph that you need to read, and then you need to answer a question around whether you think it's true, false, or you cannot say. So that's the most standard format of a verbal reasoning test that you tend to see. The reason why they get used in flying training quite often is purely because of the amount of studying that goes into passing your ground school exams. There's a huge amount of verbal information that you have to take in. So hence a lot of flying schools use them to kind of get a bit of an idea about how you're going to cope with that level of verbal information presented to you throughout your career.
Great, thank you, Tiina. Any other tests that you run, Jan, in your selection process that we might not be so familiar with in the UK, for example?
It's very, very common, but we use some commercial psychometric tests to test all these abilities that maybe they cannot be seen on an interview. But of course, we put a lot of effort on the interview, as Tiina said, to see how the student can express him or herself, how it works with the decision making process. So how is the decision making process of the candidate? Because this kind of skills can be trainable. Well, it can be trained. So it's a process as well. But if they come with a good base, then it will be easier for them to pass the course and to find the first job.
Yes, Andy.
Yeah, one of the tests that we found extremely effective, and the recruitment guys placed a huge amount of emphasis on, was a kind of video interview where the applicants would be presented with a question on their device. They'd have a minute to prepare, and then they would speak for a minute. And speaking for a minute, even for me, can be a challenge to fill that time slot and to speak in a kind of coherent and coordinated way. So that reveals verbal dexterity, ability to the ICAO, perhaps the ICAO level of qualification of the person, and just their ability to think and to react to a situation quite quickly. So that is definitely a telling and very informative aspect to certainly the Aon assessment process that is used in many operators at the moment, and we have it as well in the Airline Pilot Club in our assessment process.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. We've talked a little bit about testing. What can people do to prepare for the tests that they're going to be faced with when they come along for a selection event?
So my advice is always always use reputable testing providers and practice using their ability tests. There's lots of, free practice tests out there that you can access. So for instance, through SHL Direct, there's talent queues, got, very, very good psychometrically validated tests out there. And it's about talking to the ATO, understanding what that testing regime looks like. Always practice your mental arithmetic, as that will give you more capacity to respond to the other tasks at hand, especially those that you come up with in aptitude tests. The other thing is just don't get too obsessed by preparing just for the testing, because being a pilot is also about those interpersonal skills. So there are, lots you can do to get better at certain aspects of the testing, but it shouldn't be your main driver when you're preparing for your selection process. Aptitude tests are, as it says on the tin, they're about measuring natural talent. So you often can't prepare for them in quite the same way. I would always advise not to use the cheating softwares that are available out there to try cheat the system. So we know that they exist, and actually you might be doing yourself a disservice by doing that, because actually it should be about you figuring out whether you're suited to being a pilot. So, take it in the spirit that it's intended as a two-way process for you to understand whether you should be doing this role, but then also for the ATO to get the evidence that they need to make a good decision about your suitability.
Yeah, good advice. Jan, anything further you would add to that?
Yeah, exactly the same. And I will add to this, as Tiina said, no being too stressed because of this, not because there are things that you cannot prepare. Just be natural. Don't put more stress on you and as a student and as a candidate. Sorry. And apart from that, these are these softwares, but you have to be sure, as Tiina said, that has to be a validated test, because otherwise you are wasting your time.
Yeah, good. I think I'd be right in saying, though, that you can prepare for the interview side of it a little bit more. I mean, most interviews now are scenario-based interviews. Would I be right in saying that? Would anybody disagree with that?
So they're often, what gets used is a competency-based interview question. So they're about your past behaviour, such as tell me about a time when you worked effectively as part of a team, or you did some problem solving, or whatever it might be. But they're often about, so I think Jan picked up on this earlier, they're often about motivation as well. So I think kind of what we sometimes see with cadet pilots is that they struggle to answer the tell me about a time when type questions, because they haven't had so much work experience yet. So sometimes you kind of helicopter people into situations. You might ask them about what they would do in the future rather than just focusing on the past. So there's lots of different types of questions that do get asked as part of the interview, would be my answer to that.
Yeah. Andy, anything you'd add there?
Yeah, no, I was just going to pick up on what Jan and Tiina said about those cheating sites. What you don't want to do is fool yourself and end up in the pile of unused licenses that the European Cockpit Association have told us exist out there in Europe. So you have to listen to the message that you're getting and make a real decision about whether or not the industry is for you, whether or not the airline pilot career is for you. Of course, you can prepare. Sitting down with somebody who's been exposed or who's used to doing interviews, even at any level, can be very beneficial. What I would say, without going back to the competencies, is that everything now in the airline pilot world points to those competencies that Carl was talking about. And people who are preparing for an airline pilot interview should understand those competencies and be able to discuss them. And in their day-to-day lives, they should try to figure out ways where they can develop habits that complement the competencies such as workload management, problem-solving, decision-making, all these things that Carl was talking about. And that's one of the things we've tried to do, is to take people through what we call this indicative assessment, and then the next layer of development, personal development, that we will help people with is focused on developing a pathway to competencies. So there's a lot that somebody can do who's really interested, and the motivation point is so important as well. Like these experienced interviewers, they're able to tell before the person has finished walking across the room and sitting down in front of them, they're able to make a kind of judgment. And so preparation, focusing on what it is that those really experienced interviewers are going to be looking for. That's so important, Karen.
Yeah, I agree. So we've talked about motivation. It's come up, all three of you have mentioned it now. How does an applicant demonstrate motivation? What would an assessor be looking for there? Jan?
So, well, when we have students or candidates that want to be students in our ATU, the motivation, it's a thing that you cannot touch, no? But you talking with the student when he's explaining his or her reasons to work for, well, to do the integrated course or the modular course. Normally, by the speech, you can recognize the motivation. If the reasons why he or she is here, the reasons why this candidate has love for aviation, and then you can recognize this motivation, and then, well, it's very noticeable. It's difficult to explain for me because I'm not a psychologist, but it's a thing that you can notice when you're doing an interview.
Cute.
So I would say that motivation often comes across as, so I think Jan's right, some of it is about that intrinsic, we talk about, people being bitten by the aviation fly sometimes, their little eyes perk up when, you show them a picture of a plane or you get them talking about their flying experiences, and you see them really, really wanting and engaging with you because they're so passionate about that career path. The other way you can demonstrate motivation is through your knowledge of the industry and what you're getting yourself into. So it never fails to kind of surprise me when people haven't actually looked at into what being a pilot is about. They might have this kind of Instagram image of what they think it is like, and it's actually not that. So the best thing you can do for yourself and for your motivation is, I would say, go take a couple of flying lessons if you haven't done so already. Spend some time with pilots, within the community to really understand what the role is about. And do your research on the flying school, but also on your prospective career going forward. And that is the absolute best way in you to demonstrate motivation. Some of us are a little bit shyer than others. So think about ways in which you can, express yourself, because that then kind of translates to your employability later on as well. Try develop your own confidence and motivation, and remember that the assessors just want the best out of you. So don't be scared, just talk to them. It's a two-way process. You should be finding out as much about the ATO as they are about you.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and something that I would say now to everybody listening as well, is the ATOs will not be afraid of giving you these tips either themselves. So ask them, go and ask them questions about their own selection processes, and they'll give you tips as to how to approach them. They won't give you the answers, but they'll give you guidance. And there's lots of exhibitors available over these 2 days of Pilot Careers Live Virtual. So go and visit them when you're not in on the seminar sessions and ask them directly what they're looking for. A different question, if I may, to the panel. We are, as we well know it, in a COVID situation. How are people handling selection at the moment? What differences is it going on? Andy?
I'm not aware of any, I have to say.
Sorry, I spoke over you. Could you answer that again?
Karen, I'm not aware of any assessments happening right now. People are putting people through the training that has already been commenced prior to COVID. I'm not aware of any assessments that are taking place right now, but obviously everybody's moved on to this medium. So I found this Zoom and Teams to be an extraordinarily powerful tool over the last 4-6 months. So performing in front of a screen like this is going to be part of the process from now on, I think.
Yeah, anything you would add to that, Tiina?
So, so kind of, I guess in the flying world, there aren't as many processes going on right now, but certainly externally, kind of in other companies, assessment is still continuing as it was before. So you might not have face-to-face interviews, but you can absolutely do an interview over Zoom. I've seen a group exercise being done over Zoom recently. It was very interesting. And there's lots and lots of, obviously, online testing was already there and was being utilized. So I think what we're going to see, even following this pandemic, is a shift towards virtual assessments. So yes, it's absolutely key that you might want to go to Barcelona and visit there and see the flying school. But actually, some of those early stages are likely to happen over the internet now. So, you know, it has brought about change as well, which is quite good to see.
Yeah. So Jan, as a flying school yourself, are you doing selection at the moment, and how are you doing it?
Yeah, we are doing all the initial part of the selection via Zoom and via online tests, and well, the final part of the selection, when the student comes here and to see the school, of course, is done in person here. But yeah, we are using Zoom, Zoom or other platforms like this one to do our selection, or an initial part at least.
Okay, thank you. I've got two more questions. My final one is going to be one final tip from each of you, but I'm not coming onto that quite yet. But in the meantime, sorry, two more prior to that one. One is in 2021, new rules come into play regarding psychological testing. What are they, and what can we expect to see from that perspective? Perhaps Tiina, if I come to you first on that one.
Yeah, so I guess some of the rules are probably already being followed by some operators and ATOs out there. The new rules that are coming in are mostly around the fact that we need to make sure that the people going into flying careers are actually suited to them. So they're not a test of your kind of they're not a clinical psychology examination of your suitability from a mental health perspective. They're much more around your kind of cultural suitability, you know. So we're likely to see much more of an increase in the use of personality testing to coincide with ability and with aptitude testing as part of it. But it's going to be down to the individual ATOs to follow that guidance and demonstrate how they're going to measure those qualities that are deemed essential through the task analysis that they should be doing at the beginning. So they are going to interlink with the pilot competencies that we all keep harping on about, as well as then understanding the kind of cultural fit, understanding the cognitive capacity issues that, you know, that we want to measure as part of a pilot selection process.
Brilliant. Thanks, Tiina. Thank you. So my other question was, where do applicants often go wrong? What do they do wrong, and what can we learn from that? Anything there from you, Andy, please?
Well, I suppose lack of preparation is startlingly prevalent. You would be amazed at how many people who walk in and their paperwork is wrong. They don't know what type of aircraft the airline flies. They don't know anything about the route structure. They don't know anything about the aircraft themselves. If they're qualified and they're going into an airline interview, they will for sure be asked to demonstrate some knowledge about what their current qualification level would require them to know. So if they're current on a Piper or a Diamond or a Technam, they should know that, because they will be asked technical questions about those things. They will be asked about the competencies. Sorry, Carl. They will be asked about the competencies, their understanding of them. And so the preparation and the motivation are two of the biggest things there where people can fall down and not get that persuasive performance across, either by pure lack of preparation where you don't have the knowledge, or not convincing about the motivation.
Okay. Anything you would add to that, Jan?
Exactly as Andy said, the lack of preparation is, I think about it like a result of a lack of motivation. So if they are not motivated, they don't know what are they going to do in the flying school. So they go with this lack of preparation to the interviews. As well, we can detect some bad habits when they have to study, when they have to learn things, and as well it's because of the lack of motivation of some students. But I think this is the major issue.
Thank you. Tiina, any others that you've spotted?
With those points, what I would say is there's often a massive focus on the feared aptitude and ability tests. So all your preparation time goes on, like making sure that I do well in those tests, because you think that that's the hard part of the assessment. And actually, I think it's as Andy and Jan pointed out, it's actually much more about your kind of longer term knowledge base that you've built about the industry. You cannot just pick up a book the night before and be expected to understand the ins and outs of it. So the best thing you can do for yourself is just immerse yourself, understand what the differences are between an integrated and a modular course, because you're going to be asked about not just about your training, but then your future as a pilot, and the more the more confident you'll feel as well.
Yeah, okay, some good insights there from the three of you. If I may, I'm going to add some of my own from my experience. One is you need to speak up. If you're in a group exercise and don't get involved, the assessors have nothing to be able to make any sort of assessment from. So you might be a lovely person, have the odd small input, but it's not enough for them to be able to build a rounded picture of you. So interact and get involved. Remember that you're always on. From the minute you arrive at the building to the minute you leave the building, everybody you meet will be giving feedback to the assessors on your performance in some way or another. And you can't just perform for the interviewer. Assessors are far too knowledgeable, skilled and experienced to be able to have the wool pulled over their eyes that if you're just doing a performance in front of them in the interview, it's got to be ingrained and you have to believe it. And the other is maths. I've found that people just don't know their maths, and it's basic mental arithmetic, and I think it's most people, especially people who are good at maths, take that bit for granted and think that they're going to swan the way through that bit of the assessment. It's really worth making sure you got that sorted in your own minds. One final top tip from each of you, if I may. Oh, there you go.
Be able to keep it up throughout your career. So just be yourself. That's what the assessors want to see. So don't worry about playing some sort of role or thinking that it's something specific we want to see. Just be your best self. And if you don't know how you come across, get some feedback from your family and friends, and spend some time on self-reflection, and think about some of those competencies in terms of what might be some of your strengths and areas to develop.
Yeah. Andy, anything you'd add as your top tip?
Well, be confident without being arrogant. Remember that you're going to be, certainly from the perspective of the airline, you're going to be interviewed by a HR person, and they're looking to see whether you'll fit into the commercial and overall culture of the airline. So confidence without being arrogant is very important, I think, and getting the balance right there, because you're right, you have to speak up. Remember that when you're in your simulator, and I'm thinking again of the application process for the airline, it is so important to be a really good co-pilot to the person who's flying during that simulator assessment when you get to the multi-crew kind of stage when you're qualified. It's not just about your own flying skills. It's about how well you support your companion and how well you perform in that pilot monitoring role.
And Jan, can I just come to you really briefly, if you wouldn't mind? Sorry.
Exactly. I agree with everything. Being communicative, being not so self-confident, but no arrogant is the key. And a good pilot monitoring skills as well. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, thank you all three of you. Excellent insights there, and I hope people have taken away a lot of tips. Some of the panel, if not all of you, will be back for the Q&A session, but we've got some more discussion coming up between now and then. So thank you very much for your time. And if you're not joining the next seminar test session, don't forget to go and have a chat with the ATOs who are exhibiting virtually with us as well now. Thanks very much indeed.